They laughed when they saw the faded tattoo.
To Logan Pierce, it looked ridiculous. A blurry circle wrapped around a snake, barely visible beneath the wrinkled skin of an 81-year-old man sitting alone in a small diner.
To the customers watching, it was simply an awkward moment. To Walter Mercer, it was a grave marker, a promise. A memory carved into flesh with pain, blood, and loss. Logan didn't know any of that. All he saw was an old man drinking coffee. An old man who didn't look strong, didn't look important, didn't look like someone whose name had once been whispered in rooms where wars were planned. So Logan mocked him. He mocked the tattoo. He mocked his age. He mocked his service. And when the old man refused to fight back, Logan pushed harder. The entire diner watched as the humiliation escalated. No one expected what happened next. No one expected 3 black government SUVs to roar into the parking lot. No one expected armed security personnel to surround the building. And absolutely no one expected a 4-star general to step through the front door, march directly toward the old man, and snap into a perfect salute. The room froze. Logan froze. Even Walter looked surprised. Then the general rolled up his sleeve. The exact same tattoo stared back at everyone. A serpent swallowing its tail. A single star in the center. The symbol of a brotherhood so secret that history had almost forgotten it existed. Suddenly, the old man wasn't just another customer. He wasn't just a veteran. He wasn't even just a hero. He was a living legend. And the men who had mocked him were about to learn that the greatest warriors rarely tell the world who they are. Because true legends don't need recognition. They carry their honor in silence. And sometimes that silence lasts for more than 50 years. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, Walter Mercer arrived at Copper Lantern Diner at exactly 7:15. The routine never changed. He parked his aging pickup truck beneath the same maple tree. He walked through the front door at the same pace. He sat in the same corner booth near the window, and he ordered the same breakfast. Toast. Coffee. Nothing more. The employees knew him so well, they often started preparing his order before he even sat down. Emily Dawson, the diner waitress, greeted him with a warm smile. "Morning, Walt." "Morning, Emily." The exchange was always simple, always familiar. Always comforting. Walter liked it that way. At 81 years old, comfort had become a precious thing. Life had taken much from him. His wife, Elena, had passed away 8 years earlier after a long battle with illness. His son, Daniel, had died serving overseas. His daughter lived across the country and called whenever she could. But life kept her busy. Most days, Walter's house felt larger than it really was. Too quiet. Too empty. Too full of memories. The diner helped. For 1 hour every Tuesday and Thursday, he wasn't alone. Emily placed his coffee on the table. "How are you feeling today?" Walter gave a small smile. "Still breathing." She laughed softly. "Good. Let's keep it that way." After she walked away, Walter reached into his jacket pocket. Carefully, almost reverently, he removed a worn photograph. The edges were bent. The colors had faded decades ago. 5 young soldiers stared back at him. They stood shoulder to shoulder beneath a gray sky, covered in mud, exhausted, smiling. Walter traced a finger across each face. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The last of them had died 6 months earlier. Victor Kane, heart failure. 79 years old. Now only Walter remained, the final survivor. The final witness. The final keeper of a promise made long ago. His eyes lingered on the photograph. 1,000 memories stirred beneath the surface. Rain-soaked jungles, helicopter blades, gunfire in the darkness, names spoken for the last time. He swallowed hard. Today marked 58 years since the mission that changed all their lives. A mission no official history book would ever mention. A mission buried beneath layers of secrecy. A mission that left 5 young men carrying the same mark forever. Walter quietly slid up his sleeve. The faded tattoo appeared. Time had blurred the lines, but the meaning remained untouched. The serpent. The circle. The star. Most people saw an old tattoo. Walter saw 4 graves. He saw brothers. He saw promises. And as he stared at the symbol, he had no way of knowing that before the morning ended,
The entire world around him would be forced to confront the meaning of that mark. Because at that very moment, two young special operators were walking toward the diner, and one of them was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The bell above the diner's entrance jingled softly. Several customers glanced toward the door. Two men stepped inside. Immediately, the atmosphere changed. Not because they were loud, not because they demanded attention, but because they carried themselves with the unmistakable confidence of men accustomed to being the strongest people in any room. Logan Pierce entered first, 32 years old, broad shoulders, sharp jawline, eyes that constantly scanned every detail around him. Behind him walked Ethan Cross, slightly older, equally imposing, but calmer, more observant. The pair had spent the morning conducting training exercises at Fort Ashford and had stopped for breakfast before returning to base. Emily greeted them politely. "Morning, gentlemen." Logan nodded. "Coffee first, food second." Emily laughed and motioned toward an empty booth. As they crossed the dining room, Logan's attention drifted across the customers. Construction workers, retirees, families. Nothing unusual. Then he noticed Walter. The old man sat quietly by the window, staring at a faded photograph. For reasons Logan couldn't explain, his eyes lingered. Perhaps it was the photograph. Perhaps it was the strange sadness on Walter's face. Or perhaps it was simply boredom. Whatever the reason, his gaze eventually landed on the tattoo visible beneath Walter's rolled sleeve. Logan slowed. "What is that?" Ethan followed his gaze. "Leave it alone," Logan smirked. "I'm just curious." They sat down nearby. Emily delivered their coffee. For a few moments, everything seemed normal, but Logan kept looking. The tattoo bothered him. Over the years, he had studied military history obsessively. Special operations insignias, unit patches, unofficial combat symbols, memorial markings. He recognized thousands of them, but not this one. The serpent. The circle. The star. Nothing. That irritated him. His confidence had always been rooted in knowledge. If he didn't recognize something, surely it couldn't be important. Finally, he stood and walked toward Walter's booth. Ethan sighed heavily. "Logan!" But Logan ignored him. He stopped beside the table. Walter slowly looked up. The old veteran's pale blue eyes met his. Calm. Untroubled. Almost tired. Logan pointed toward the tattoo. "Interesting ink." Walter glanced down, then back up. "Suppose it is." The answer wasn't what Logan expected. A few nearby customers looked over. Sensing tension, Logan leaned slightly closer. "What does it mean?" Walter folded the photograph and slipped it carefully into his jacket. "Something from a long time ago." The response should have ended the conversation. Instead, it encouraged Logan. The old man wasn't giving details, wasn't explaining, wasn't defending himself. To Logan, that felt suspicious. "You military?" Walter took a sip of coffee. "A long time ago." "What branch?" Walter shrugged. "Doesn't matter much anymore." Logan laughed. "Sure it does." Ethan had left his booth and now stood a few feet away. He recognized the warning signs. Logan was entering dangerous territory. Not physical danger. Something worse. Arrogance. The kind that blinds people. "Let's go eat," Ethan said quietly. Logan ignored him again. His focus remained fixed on Walter. "You know," he said, "a lot of people pretend these days." Walter said nothing. Fake stories. Silence. Fake service. Still nothing. The quiet only fueled Logan further. Around the diner, conversations began fading. Customers stopped eating. Emily watched nervously from behind the counter. Logan folded his arms. "You ever hear of stolen valor?" Finally, Walter looked directly at him. Not angry, not intimidated, simply disappointed. And somehow that expression irritated Logan more than any insult ever could. Because for the first time all morning, he felt like the old man was looking straight through him, and he hated it. For several long seconds, neither man spoke. The diner felt unnaturally quiet. Even the clinking of silverware had stopped. Walter Mercer looked at Logan Pierce with the same calm expression he had worn since the young operator approached his booth. But inside, something had begun to shift. Something old. Something painful. Logan mistook the silence for weakness. He smiled. "That's what I thought." Walter slowly lifted his coffee cup. His hand remained steady. "Thought what?" Logan shrugged.
that maybe the story behind that tattoo isn't real. A few customers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ethan sighed heavily. Logan, enough! But Logan wasn't finished. He had spent years earning his reputation. Selection, deployments, combat operations. He belonged to one of the most respected military communities on Earth. And somewhere along the way, confidence had slowly become arrogance. If that symbol means something, Logan continued, why has nobody ever heard of it? Walter lowered his cup. Not everything important gets written down. The answer irritated Logan, because deep down, it sounded true. And truth rarely flatters pride. So what? Logan asked. Secret unit? Black Ops? One of those stories? Walter simply looked out the window. The silence felt like a dismissal. Logan's jaw tightened. He stepped closer. Then his eyes drifted once again to the faded tattoo. The serpent. The circle. The star. Without thinking, he reached forward. His finger touched the old ink. The moment contact was made, Walter froze. The diner disappeared. The smell of coffee vanished. The sound of conversation vanished. Everything vanished. Suddenly he was young again, 23 years old, kneeling in mud. Rain pouring from a black sky. The jungle around him alive with distant gunfire. A wounded soldier lay beside him, blood mixed with rainwater. A helicopter burned somewhere beyond the trees. Walter could still hear the screams, still hear the explosions, still hear the desperate voice of his closest friend. Don't stop moving. The memory struck with terrifying force. For decades, he had carried it quietly, locked away, buried beneath routine and time. Yet one touch had ripped open the door. He remembered 5 exhausted soldiers huddled beneath a makeshift shelter. No medals, no witnesses, no recognition, only survival, only brotherhood, only a promise. A sharpened bamboo needle, ink mixed by hand. One by one they mocked their arms, not as a badge of honor, not as decoration, but as a vow. A promise that none of them would ever forget the men who never came home. A promise that no matter what happened afterward, they would carry those memories forever. Walter blinked. The jungle vanished. The diner returned. Coffee. Voices. Sunlight. But the pain remained. His chest tightened. His throat felt dry. Across the table, Logan noticed the change. For the first time, the old man's eyes looked distant, haunted. Not frightened, haunted. And yet Logan misunderstood what he was seeing. He thought he was finally getting a reaction, a victory. He leaned closer. There it is. Walter slowly withdrew his arm. The movement was deliberate, protective, almost reverent. Logan laughed softly. What? Hit a nerve? The words landed like a knife. Not because they were cruel, because they were ignorant. Because the young man had no idea what that symbol represented. No idea whose names were attached to it. No idea how much blood had been spilled beneath that mark. And no idea that every second he continued speaking was bringing him closer to a truth powerful enough to change his life forever. Nearby, Emily watched Walter's face. She noticed something nobody else did. His eyes were shining. Not with anger, not with fear, with grief. The kind of grief that never truly leaves. And at that moment, Emily realized this wasn't just an argument. This was an old wound, being torn open after more than 50 years. And somehow, she knew things were about to get much worse. The silence inside Copper Lantern Diner had become unbearable. Nobody returned to their meals. Nobody resumed their conversations. Every eye remained fixed on Walter Mercer and Logan Pierce. The old veteran sat quietly in his booth. Logan stood over him, and the tension between them seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. Ethan Cross rubbed his forehead. He had seen this side of Logan before. Not often, but enough. Once Logan became convinced he was right, it was almost impossible to stop him. Let's go, Ethan said again. We've got better things to do. Logan ignored him. His eyes remained locked on Walter. You know what bothers me? Logan asked. Walter didn't answer.
The people who actually served usually don't need mysterious stories. Still no response.
Logan laughed. Maybe that's why you keep avoiding the question. Walter slowly exhaled. His voice remained calm. Son, sometimes silence is wiser than explanation. The answer only irritated Logan further. To him, it sounded like another excuse. Another attempt to avoid proving anything. He shook his head. That's convenient. Then everything happened at once. Logan made a dismissive gesture with his arm. His elbow clipped the edge of Walter's coffee cup. The mug tipped over. Hot coffee spilled across the table. The dark liquid spread rapidly, straight toward the old photograph. Walter's eyes widened. No. The word escaped before he could stop it. The photograph soaked up the coffee instantly. The image of 5 young soldiers darkened beneath the stain. Then the wet picture slid from the edge of the table and fell onto the floor. For the first time all morning, Walter moved quickly. He pushed himself forward. His trembling hand reached down, but Logan got there first. The young operator picked up the photograph. Water dripped from its corners. The faded image remained visible. 5 soldiers, mud-covered, young, smiling, frozen forever in a moment that no longer existed. Walter slowly stood. His breathing had changed. Emily noticed immediately. The old man's hands were shaking, not from age, from emotion. "Give it back," Walter said quietly. Logan examined the photograph. Something about the image unsettled him. The men didn't look like ordinary soldiers. There was something in their eyes, something hard, something dangerous. Yet pride refused to let him stop. "So these are the famous war heroes," he smirked. Walter said nothing. "Which one are you?" Logan tilted the photograph, studying the faces. "Let me guess." His finger tapped one of the soldiers. "The cook?" A few customers gasped. Emily felt anger flare inside her chest. But Logan wasn't finished. "You know what I think?" Walter's jaw tightened. "I think this whole thing is a fantasy." Logan held up the damaged picture. "A story you've been telling yourself for 50 years. The words struck harder than any physical blow. Because that photograph wasn't simply paper. It was the last surviving image of the only family Walter had ever truly known. 4 men now gone. 4 graves scattered across the country. 4 voices he would never hear again. For a moment, the diner disappeared once more. He remembered their laughter, their arguments, their promises, the final extraction, the names carved onto memorial stones, and the funerals he had attended, one by one through the decades. When he returned to the present, his eyes glistened. Emily saw it. The old man was fighting tears, not for himself, for them. For the men in the photograph. That was the moment something inside Emily changed. This wasn't a disagreement. This wasn't an argument. This was cruelty, pure and simple. She quietly removed her apron, set down her order pad, and walked toward the back office. Nobody noticed her leave. Nobody. Except Walter. For a brief second, their eyes met, and somehow he understood. She was going to help. He didn't know how. He didn't know who she could possibly call. But as Emily disappeared through the office door, the first pieces of a chain reaction began to move. A chain reaction that would soon reach the highest levels of America's special operations community. And when it did, everything Logan Pierce believed about Walter Mercer was about to collapse. The moment Emily Dawson stepped into the diner's back office, she closed the door and leaned against it. Her heart was pounding. For several seconds, she simply stood there, trying to calm herself, trying to understand why she felt so strongly about what she had just witnessed. Walter Mercer wasn't family. He wasn't even a close friend. He was simply an old customer, a kind man who always asked about her children, a lonely widower who never complained, a quiet soul who tipped generously despite obviously living on a modest income. But watching Logan Pierce humiliate him had awakened something fierce inside her. Walter didn't deserve that. Nobody did. Especially not after seeing the pain in his eyes when the photograph hit the floor. Emily pulled out her phone. There was only one person she could think to call. Her cousin. Olivia Hartwell. Olivia worked at Special Operations Strategic Command Headquarters on Fort Ashford. Most days, her job involved schedules, reports, and meetings far above Emily's understanding. Normally, Emily would never bother her during work hours. Today was different. The call connected on the second ring. Olivia Hartwell. The professional tone immediately answered. "Liv, it's me." "Emily?" Olivia sounded surprised. Everything okay? No. Emily glanced toward the office door, lowering her voice. I need your help. A pause. What happened? Emily quickly explained. 2 operators. An elderly veteran. A strange tattoo. Public humiliation. The damaged photograph. The growing confrontation. Olivia listened patiently. At first, she sounded mildly concerned. Nothing more. Then, Emily mentioned Walter's name. His name is Walter Mercer. Silence. A brief silence, but enough for Emily to notice. Olivia? I'm here. The response came slower now, more cautious. Emily continued. He has this tattoo. What kind of tattoo? A snake. Another pause. A snake? Yeah. Emily tried to remember. A snake eating its own tail. Silence again. Longer this time. And there's a star in the middle. Nothing. No response. Olivia? When her cousin finally spoke, her voice had completely changed. The casual tone was gone, replaced by something Emily had never heard before. Fear. Describe it again. Emily repeated every detail. The serpent. The circle. The star. The faded photograph. Walter Mercer. Every word. By the time she finished, Olivia was no longer breathing normally. Emily could hear it through the phone. Quick, shallow breaths. What is it? Emily asked. Do you know what that symbol means? Olivia didn't answer immediately, because the truth was, she didn't know exactly what it meant. Not officially. Nobody had ever explained it. But during 3 years at SOSC headquarters, she had overheard enough whispers, enough stories, enough fragments. The symbol appeared occasionally in conversations between senior officers, always spoken quietly, always with respect, sometimes with awe. Project Eclipse, a name that seemed to exist halfway between history and myth. Most personnel believed it was nothing more than military folklore, ghost stories, told by aging veterans. Yet every time the subject surfaced, even generals paid attention. And now that symbol had suddenly appeared in a diner, attached to a man named Walter Mercer. Olivia stood from her desk, her pulse racing. Across the command center, officers moved between classified meetings. Computers displayed operational briefings. Security personnel monitored sensitive communications. Everything around her suddenly felt distant, because one thought echoed inside her mind. If the stories were true, then somebody had just insulted a man who should never have been insulted. Emily. Yeah? Listen carefully. Olivia grabbed her access badge, already moving toward the secure conference wing. Keep him there. What? The old man. Emily frowned. I don't control where he goes. Just do whatever you can. Olivia's voice trembled. Because if that really is Walter Mercer, she stopped, unable to finish the sentence. What happens if it is? Emily asked. Olivia stared toward the heavily guarded conference room at the end of the corridor. The room where General Adrian Blackwood was currently conducting one of the most classified meetings in the country. Then she whispered the only answer she could think of. The wrong people are about to have the worst day of their lives. And with that, she started running toward the conference room. Olivia Hartwell had worked at Special Operations Strategic Command for nearly 4 years. In that time, she had learned many things. She had learned how to navigate classified schedules. She had learned how to deal with high-ranking officers. She had learned which emergencies justified interrupting senior leadership. And she had learned one rule above all others. Never interrupt General Adrian Blackwood during a classified briefing. Never. The consequences were usually career-ending. Yet as Olivia hurried down the secure corridor, she knew she was about to do exactly that. The conference room stood at the end of the hall. 2 armed security personnel guarded the entrance. Inside, some of the most influential military leaders in the country were discussing ongoing operations around the world. Normally, nobody entered without authorization. Today, Olivia didn't care. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The image of Walter Mercer refused to leave her mind. The name. The tattoo. The stories. All of it felt impossible, yet something deep inside her knew the situation was real. As she approached the door, Colonel Nathan Whitaker stepped into her path. What are you doing? His voice was sharp. Olivia swallowed. I need to speak with the general. Whitaker frowned. Not now. It can't wait. Everything can wait. No, sir. The colonel stared at her, surprised by the firmness in her voice. Olivia rarely challenged anyone, especially not senior officers. But this time she stood her ground. Whitaker's expression hardened. Airman, do you understand what's happening in there? Yes, sir. Then go back to your desk. Olivia shook her head. The movement felt almost reckless. I'm sorry, sir. Before he could stop her, she stepped around him and pushed through the conference room door. Every conversation inside instantly stopped. The room fell silent. A dozen senior officers turned toward her. Satellite images glowed across giant digital screens. Classified documents covered the conference table. And seated at the head of the room was General Adrian Blackwood. The four-star commander slowly looked up. His eyes narrowed. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the general broke the silence. This had better be important. Olivia's throat tightened. Every instinct told her to apologize and leave. Instead, she walked forward, one step at a time, until she stood beside him. The room watched, waiting. Olivia leaned down, then quietly whispered into the general's ear. Sir, I just received a call from a local diner near Fort Ashford. Blackwood's expression remained unchanged. Continue. A man named Walter Mercer is being harassed by two active duty operators. Nothing. No reaction. The room relaxed slightly. Then Olivia spoke the next sentence. They're questioning a tattoo, sir. The general remained still. Olivia continued. A serpent eating its tail. Still nothing. And a single star inside the circle. The effect was immediate. Terrifyingly immediate. General Blackwood froze completely. The color drained from his face. The room noticed. Every officer noticed, because none of them had ever seen the general react like this. Not once. Not during combat briefings. Not during casualty reports. Not during national security crises. For several seconds, he simply stared forward, silent, motionless, as though someone had struck him with a physical blow. Then something changed. The calm disappeared. Beneath it emerged something far more dangerous. Rage. Not loud rage, not explosive rage, cold rage. The kind that made entire rooms uncomfortable. The general slowly stood. His chair scraped across the floor. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Repeat the name. His voice was barely above a whisper. Walter Mercer, sir. Blackwood closed his eyes. For a brief moment, memories flooded back. Rain. Jungle. Blood. Gunfire. A younger version of himself, lying wounded in the mud, and one man refusing to leave him behind, one man carrying him through hell. Walter Mercer. When Blackwood opened his eyes again, they looked completely different. Harder. Darker. More emotional than Olivia had ever seen. He looked around the room. This meeting is over. Several commanders exchanged confused glances. Nobody dared question him. Blackwood turned toward the door. Get my vehicles. His voice echoed through the room. Now. The security personnel moved immediately. The conference dissolved into chaos. Phones appeared. Orders were issued. The command center suddenly came alive. Meanwhile, 30 minutes away, at Copper Lantern Diner, Walter Mercer remained seated in his booth, unaware that one phone call had just unleashed a storm, and that storm was already racing toward him. Back at Copper Lantern Diner, the atmosphere had become suffocating. The entire room seemed trapped in a state of nervous anticipation. Nobody knew exactly what would happen next, but everyone knew something was wrong, very wrong. Walter Mercer sat quietly in his booth. The damaged photograph rested on the table before him. Coffee stains covered the image. One corner had begun to tear. Walter gently smoothed the photograph with trembling fingers, as though he were caring for a wounded friend. Across from him, Logan Pierce watched. The sight should have stirred sympathy. Instead, frustration continued to fuel his arrogance, because Walter refused to react the way Logan expected. No yelling. No threats, no angry confrontation, only silence. And somehow that silence felt like judgment. Logan folded his arms. You still haven't answered my question. Walter didn't look up. What question was that? The calm reply made several customers cringe. Logan's jaw tightened. The tattoo. Walter slowly lifted his eyes. It means something to the people it was meant for. The answer landed like gasoline on a fire. Logan laughed sharply. That's it? A few heads lowered. Emily had returned from the office, and now stood behind the counter. Her stomach twisted with anxiety. She knew help was coming. At least, she hoped it was. But she had no idea how long it would take. And Logan was growing more reckless by the minute. "You know what I think?" Logan continued. "I think you've spent years telling stories nobody can verify." Walter remained silent. "I think people like you make real veterans look bad." Several customers gasped. Ethan immediately stepped forward. "Logan." There was a warning in his voice now, a serious warning. But Logan ignored it. His pride had taken control. He pointed toward the stained photograph. "Those guys in the picture probably weren't anything special either." The words hit harder than he realized. Walter's hand froze. For a brief moment, pain flashed across his face, a raw pain. The kind that only comes from losing people you loved. Ethan saw it. Emily saw it. Even some of the customers saw it, but Logan didn't. Or perhaps he simply refused to. He stepped closer. "You know what your problem is?" Walter slowly stood. The movement surprised everyone. At 81, he rose carefully. Yet there was still dignity in the way he carried himself. Still strength. Still pride. Logan continued. "You think old stories make you important." The diner fell completely silent. Walter looked directly into the younger man's eyes. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Walter spoke. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "The older I get, son, the less important I feel." The answer caught Logan off guard. For a split second, uncertainty flickered across his face. Then pride buried it. He reached toward Walter's shoulder. Not violently. Not yet. But with enough force to make his point. "You know what? Maybe we should take this outside." Several customers immediately stood. Emily's heart nearly stopped. Ethan grabbed Logan's arm. "What are you doing?" "I'm done playing games." Walter remained still. He didn't step back. He didn't raise his fists. He simply looked tired. That somehow made the situation worse. Logan tightened his grip. Then it happened. A low rumble echoed outside. At first, nobody paid attention. The sound grew louder, deeper. More powerful. Heads slowly turned toward the windows. The rumble became a roar. Tires. Engines. Heavy vehicles moving fast. Very fast. A construction worker near the front window frowned. "What the hell is that?" The sound grew louder still. Then 3 black SUVs appeared. They entered the parking lot at speed, braking hard, stopping in perfect formation directly outside the diner. Every conversation died instantly. The vehicles weren't ordinary government cars. Everyone could tell. Dark windows. Government plates. Precision movement. Professional security drivers. The front doors of the SUVs opened simultaneously. Men in military uniforms stepped out. Serious men. Command personnel. The kind of people who never appeared without a reason. Inside the diner, Logan's confidence finally began to crack. Ethan stared through the glass, his face turning pale, because he recognized one of the men exiting the lead vehicle. And if that person was here, then someone far more important was about to walk through the front door. A terrible realization settled over him. Whatever was happening, it had something to do with Walter Mercer. And the worst part? The storm hadn't even arrived yet. The roar of the engines faded. An eerie silence settled over Copper Lantern Diner. No one moved. No one spoke. Outside, the 3 black SUVs sat motionless in the parking lot, like predators waiting to strike. Then the doors opened. One by one, uniformed personnel stepped out. Their movements were precise, disciplined, purposeful. Even people with no military background could sense the difference. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were senior command personnel. The kind of people who carried authority without ever raising their voices. Inside the diner, Ethan Cross felt his stomach sink. He recognized one of them immediately. Sergeant Major Victor Kane, a man known throughout the special operations community. A man who never appeared unless someone important was nearby. Very important. Ethan's mouth went dry. His eyes shifted toward Walter Mercer, then back toward the vehicles. The pieces were beginning to connect, and he didn't like the picture they were forming. The diner door opened. The small bell above it chimed softly. Every head turned. A tall figure stepped inside. The room instantly felt smaller. General Adrian Blackwood entered without hesitation. 4 silver stars gleamed on his uniform.
His presence commanded attention before he spoke a single word.
Several customers immediately recognized his rank. Others simply sensed the weight of his authority. Logan Pierce stared in disbelief. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. A 4-star general. Here. At this diner.
For what?
For who? The answer became obvious almost immediately. General Blackwood's gaze swept across the room. He ignored the customers, ignored the staff, ignored Logan and Ethan completely. His eyes found only one person, Walter Mercer. The old veteran remained standing beside his booth, holding the damaged photograph. For a moment, neither man moved, neither spoke. The entire diner seemed frozen in time. Then General Blackwood walked forward. 1 step. 2 steps. 3. The distance between them disappeared.
Logan suddenly became aware that he was still standing near Walter.
Still far too close. The general's eyes briefly shifted toward him. The look lasted less than a second. Yet Logan felt a chill race through his entire body. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment. Pure disappointment. And somehow that felt far worse. Blackwood stopped directly in front of Walter. The room held its breath. Then something happened that nobody would ever forget. The general snapped to attention. Perfect posture. Perfect discipline. Perfect respect. And then he saluted. Not a casual greeting, not a friendly gesture, a formal military salute, offered by one of the most powerful officers in the country, to an 81-year-old man standing beside a diner booth. Gasps erupted throughout the room. Emily covered her mouth. Several customers stared in disbelief. Even Ethan looked stunned. Logan simply froze. His face had gone completely pale. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Blackwood slowly lowered his hand. His voice carried emotion rarely heard from senior commanders. It's been a long time, Walter. A faint smile appeared on Walter's weathered face. Longer than it should have been, Adrian. The general nodded quietly. For a brief moment, they weren't an elderly veteran and a 4-star commander. They were simply 2 old friends, carrying memories no one else could understand. Then Blackwood turned. His eyes settled on Logan and Ethan. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. You questioned this man. Neither operator answered. Neither operator could. Their confidence had completely vanished. Slowly, deliberately, General Blackwood unbuttoned the cuff of his sleeve. The room watched. Confused. Curious. Terrified. The general rolled the fabric upward, past his wrist, past his forearm, and there it was. The same tattoo. The serpent eating its own tail. The circle. The star. Identical. A wave of shock swept through the diner. Several customers actually stepped backward. Logan felt the blood drain from his face. Because in that instant, every assumption he had made about Walter Mercer shattered, and General Adrian Blackwood had not even begun to tell them who Walter really was. The silence inside Copper Lantern Diner became absolute. No one dared speak. No one dared move. All eyes remained fixed on the identical tattoos displayed on the arms of Walter Mercer and General Adrian Blackwood. For Logan Pierce, the world seemed to tilt beneath his feet. His mouth felt dry. His pulse hammered in his ears. Every confident assumption he had made during the last hour was collapsing around him. Walter Mercer was not a fraud. That much was now obvious. The only question left was far more frightening. Who exactly was he? General Blackwood slowly lowered his sleeve. Then he turned toward Logan and Ethan. Neither operator could meet his gaze. The disappointment in the general's expression felt unbearable. Finally, Blackwood spoke. His voice was calm, controlled. Yet every word carried enormous weight. You wanted to know what the tattoo means? Neither man answered. Blackwood nodded once. Then listen carefully. The entire diner leaned forward. Even the cooks had emerged from the kitchen. The customers stood motionless. Nobody wanted to miss a single word. Long before modern special operations became famous, Blackwood began. There was a unit that officially never existed. His eyes shifted briefly toward Walter. Project Eclipse. The name seemed to hang in the air. Most people had never heard it before, yet something about it felt important, historic, dangerous. The government buried nearly every record. Blackwood continued. The missions were denied. The operators were forgotten. The casualties were never publicly acknowledged. He paused. But they were real. Walter remained silent, his eyes focused on the damaged photograph still resting in his hands. The faces of 4 dead friends stared back at him. Blackwood looked at Logan. "You see an old man." His voice hardened. "I see the man who saved my life." The statement hit the room like a thunderclap. Several customers gasped. Emily's eyes widened. Logan felt his stomach drop. Blackwood continued. In 1968, Project Eclipse was conducting a mission deep inside hostile territory. His gaze drifted somewhere far away, toward memories decades old. "We were compromised." The room remained silent. 3 enemy battalions began hunting us. A few people exchanged stunned glances. Blackwood's voice grew quieter, more personal. "For 18 days, we ran." The images seemed to come alive through his words. Rain, mud, dark jungle. Exhaustion. Fear. We lost communication. We lost support. We lost nearly everything. Walter lowered his head slightly because he remembered every detail. Every scream. Every death. Blackwood swallowed, then continued. "I was 24 years old." His hand unconsciously touched the tattoo. "I thought I was invincible." A sad smile appeared briefly. "I was wrong." The smile vanished. "An ambush left me critically wounded." Several people in the diner listened without blinking. "I couldn't walk. I couldn't fight. I couldn't even carry my own weapon." His eyes found Walter again. "Most men would have left me behind." The room became still. Walter Mercer didn't. The general's voice cracked slightly. The emotion surprised everyone, including Logan. "He carried me." The words landed softly, yet somehow hit harder than anything else. Blackwood continued. "For 2 days, through swamps, through enemy patrols, through conditions that should have killed both of us." Walter closed his eyes. The memories returned. The weight. The pain. The blood. The endless determination to keep moving, because leaving a brother behind had never been an option. Blackwood's voice softened. "When we finally reached extraction," he stopped, struggling briefly with the memory. "Only 5 members of Project Eclipse survived." The room fell silent once again. 5. Only 5. Blackwood looked toward the photograph. "The men in that picture weren't legends because they won battles." His voice was firm. "They became legends because they refused to abandon each other." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The truth settled over the diner like a heavy blanket. And then came the final revelation, the one that completely shattered what remained of Logan's pride. Blackwood looked directly into his eyes. "Of those 5 men who received that tattoo together," he paused, "only 2 are still alive today." The room held its breath. The general placed a hand on Walter's shoulder, a gesture of respect, of gratitude, of brotherhood. Then he finished the sentence. "You are standing in front of both of them." The diner erupted into stunned silence once more, and for the first time since this began, Logan Pierce understood exactly how badly he had misjudged the quiet old man standing before him. For several moments, after General Adrian Blackwood revealed the truth, nobody inside Copper Lantern Diner spoke. The silence felt sacred, as though everyone present had suddenly stepped into a chapter of history they had never known existed. Logan Pierce stood frozen, his face pale, his confidence shattered. Everything he thought he knew about courage, service, and honor had been turned upside down in a matter of minutes. The old man he had mocked, the man he had dismissed, the man he had nearly forced out of the diner, was one of the warriors responsible for building the legacy he himself had spent years admiring. And worst of all, Walter Mercer had never once tried to defend himself, never once tried to impress anyone, never once mentioned a single accomplishment. General Blackwood finally turned toward the 2 operators. His expression remained calm, but the disappointment in his eyes cut deeper than any shouted reprimand ever could. "You wear the uniform of a quiet professional." His voice echoed through the diner. "Today you forgot what that means." Neither Logan nor Ethan spoke. "You believed rank made you important," Blackwood continued. "You believed knowledge made you superior." His gaze hardened. "And you believed humility was weakness." The words struck home because they were true. Logan lowered his head. For the first time that morning, he had no defense, no excuse, no argument. The general stepped closer. Every tactic you use, every opportunity you've been given, every path that led you here. He pointed toward Walter. Men like him paid for it. The room remained silent. Then Blackwood delivered the consequence. Report to my office at 500 tomorrow. Logan swallowed. Yes, sir. You'll be reassigned. The words landed heavily. Logan understood immediately. His career would never be the same. Yet strangely, that wasn't what hurt most. The shame hurt more. The realization of who he had become hurt more. Then something unexpected happened. Walter Mercer spoke. That's enough. The room turned toward him. Even Blackwood looked surprised. Walter slowly folded the damaged photograph and placed it back into his jacket. Then he faced Logan. There was no anger in his eyes, no satisfaction, no desire for revenge, only wisdom. The tattoo doesn't make the man. The words were soft, yet every person in the diner heard them clearly. The man gives meaning to the tattoo. Walter looked down briefly at the faded symbol on his arm. Symbols fade. Ranks disappear. Stories get forgotten. His eyes met Logan's. But character stays. The young operator felt his throat tighten. Walter continued. That's the only thing you truly own. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted, because every word carried the weight of a lifetime. After a long moment, Walter offered a small nod. The conversation was over, at least for him. A year later, much had changed. General Blackwood established a new educational program called Legacy. Every future special operations candidate studied the history of those who came before them. The forgotten warriors, the quiet heroes, the men whose sacrifices had built the foundation of the modern force. As for Logan and Ethan, they spent years helping run the program, listening, learning, growing, and eventually, understanding. One afternoon, nearly a year after the incident, Logan walked into Red Oak Hardware and spotted a familiar figure examining a bin of bolts. Walter Mercer. The old veteran looked exactly the same. Logan approached slowly, nervously. Mr. Mercer? Walter looked up. Recognition immediately appeared in his eyes. I remember you. Logan nodded. I know. For several seconds, he struggled to find the right words. Then he stopped trying to sound impressive, stopped trying to sound clever, and simply told the truth. I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air. Honest. Simple. Real. Walter studied him for a moment, then extended his hand. Logan shook it. The old man's grip remained surprisingly strong. We all have things to learn, son. Walter smiled gently. The important thing is that you keep learning. That was all. No lecture. No punishment. No grand speech. Just grace. As Walter returned to searching for bolts, Logan stood there for a moment, watching him. Understanding at last. True heroes rarely announce themselves. They don't demand recognition. They don't boast about their sacrifices. Sometimes they sit quietly in corner booths, drink coffee, carry old photographs, and honor promises made long ago. The greatest legends are not remembered because they sought attention. They are remembered because they never abandoned the people who depended on them. And long after the medals fade and the stories disappear, their character remains forever.